All right, let's get to Canada, where recreational pot became legal this week. Greg Taylor is with us, Purpose Investments Portfolio Manager. Now, this is a fund that invests in cannabis-related companies. Greg, you're in Canada. I want you to act as a reporter for us. What was it like this week up there?
Well, I'm in Toronto, and Toronto was almost a non-event. You wouldn't really notice except for all the media swarming around here. The way Canada legalized recreational marijuana is they did it on a province-by-province basis. And Ontario didn't, which is where Toronto is, didn't have its act together. So everything here is online sales until April. So it came and went, and it really didn't change anything day to day.
What about in other provinces where it's been around and was working properly on the first day? I hear demand was very strong. Is that accurate?
It was. There were lines out the door for a lot of stores. Now, you have to remember, there weren't that many stores up and running. It does feel like even though we knew this was coming for a few years, it was really rushed at the last minute as stores ramped up supply. So there wasn't a lot of product on the shelves, and there weren't a lot of physical stores open yet. So a lot of big pictures of lines, but really we're going to have to wait for another few months to see what the actual bottom line sales were.
Well, I don't get that. What went wrong? I mean, if you're anticipating it for a long, long time, they couldn't get their act together on day one. What happened? What's wrong?
Well, I think a lot of it is regulation, that there was still a lot of regulation how they're going to roll this out. It took a while to get through the Senate. There were a lot of different people sticking their hands up trying to change the policy. And by the time they got going to keep the Liberals a date that they wanted rolled out to, I think it was a little too rushed at the end of the day.
But you are convinced that ultimately when things get rolling, cannabis is a big, new, expanding industry in Canada. You're on board with that, obviously.
Well, I am, but I'm more as thinking globally this is going to be a massive industry. I think we're seeing a lot of new exciting companies come out and a lot of new products come in, and I think it's going to roll really beyond just the normal smoking of cannabis. It's going to go to the CBD side, which is more medical, and I think we're just scratching the surface of this, and this is going to be a massive industry that I think is going to evolve over the next several years. Okay,
you've got a fund, and you invest the money in the fund into various cannabis-related industries. You just spread it across the board, suppliers, growers, retailers, I guess paraphernalia people. You spread your investments across the board?
Well, a few years ago, when the industry really launched and we had companies go IPO'd, it really started as more of the growers. So a lot of the companies like the Canopies or the Auroras, when they IPO'd in Canada, they really came at it from a production side of growing capacity, how much greenhouses they were going to grow. And now it's evolved over the last few years to get more into the medical side and to the dispensary side and some branding side. So what I'm trying to do in the fund is get away from the growers towards higher up the value-added chain into the branding side of companies. The other big change that we're seeing as Canadian investors is the industry has really moved from Canadian-focused companies more towards U.S. companies. There's a lot of companies up here, but what we're starting to see really raise money in the last few weeks and the last few months is more American companies that are coming up, doing an RTO or IPO on the Canadian exchanges, but they're 100% focused on U.S. companies. So I'm starting to do some more work on those because we all know the U.S. market is way bigger than the Canadian market and has much better potential to create brands.
But at this point, is Canada the leading cannabis industry area?
Well, I think what we've all determined is that Canada is the place that everyone comes to raise capital. The capital markets are open in Canada for cannabis companies to raise funds, and I think that's the big differentiator.
So they're not in America, right? I mean, the capital markets are not available and open in America because at the federal level in America, cannabis is a Class A drug, and that's not a good deal.
Absolutely. So Canada has been able to get around that. So companies can come up here, list on our exchanges, and raise funds to come back into the U.S. Now, it sounds like things are changing in the U.S. at a faster pace, and companies are indicating that within the next year, they think that the States Act could pass, which would free up the capital markets for more further funding and potentially listing in the U.S. But at this point in time, to raise cash, you have to list on a Canadian exchange. You can't list on a U.S. exchange if you're operating in the U.S.
Right, got it. Canada leads on this one. Greg Taylor, thanks for joining us. We'll be back to you, I promise. It's a big new industry. You're in it. Thanks very much, sir.